Hey, Mike, you've got 20 franchise locations, right? You have five company owned. We're in what, three states, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina.
Mhm.
How far along was the company before you came along?
Yeah, we were at 20 locations at that point in time.
Total.
Yeah, and we had grown and had contracted. We had some
Hmm.
early franchisees, and I think that's where Robert really got his feet underneath him to say, "Hey, we need to stop this until we can do a better job of
Hmm.
ensuring folks are successful." So the playbook wasn't written. We've had some folks that figured out a way to do it without much of a restaurant background, and we took a good hard look at who those people were. Like I tell you, our most successful franchisees here in North Carolina, 10 years ago, she was a school teacher that taught math and didn't have a lot of money. And they figured out a way to get a franchise open. And she has worked and worked and worked at it. Everybody in town knows her.
Hmm.
So when you look at that and say, is that part of the playbook? And the answer is yes. Yeah, that level of hospitality, community involvement is part of the playbook. I think it's the franchisor's job to have that playbook available that just says, from soup to nuts, this is what a famous toastery delivers for you.
For sure. More and more franchisors that I talk to about what makes their best franchisees thrive in the system, like what are those common threads and why how do they stand out? Again and again, it's community involvement because
Mhm.
I think because customers want to feel like they're whether they're a restaurant or a customer of any other business, they don't want to feel like they're going to a chain restaurant. They want to feel like they're going somewhere where it is local. So the
It's there.
magic is
Yeah.
how do you create the systems and processes of a brand without making people feel like they've gone to a chain restaurant,
Ex-
right?
That's exactly it. Connectivity. Um, it's beyond just being a member of the Chamber of Commerce, right? It is. Are you involved in your local prayer groups? That's not to say you have to be. Are
Hmm.
you involved with the Little League, system? Are you involved with, I think Chick-fil-A did a masterful job of really saying that level of community involvement, but it can't be that cookie cutter. I mean, the part of our ethos is it has to be genuine and sincere, period.
Hmm.
These have to be things that you genuinely want to be involved in because people sense that. I think most people can spot a phony a mile away, right?
Definitely. And the other thing is what we're really telling people is that if you're looking to buy a franchise, make no mistake about it. When you buy a franchise, the work starts now. It's not like, oh, I bought a franchise and people
Mhm.
are just going to come through the doors. Because what we're saying is you buy a franchise and now you have to get involved in the community and do the work. And, you know, besides that, Mike, what are the other things that make, well, for example, this one franchisee, what makes her stand out? What else is she doing?
I wish I could bottle it. And this is what we look through in our discovery process because we've learned they have to have this. You can go through life with a compliance attitude, or you can go through whatever endeavors you're in committed. And there's a giant gap between those two words, commitment and compliance. If you minimally comply with our franchise agreement and our systems, we think you have a reasonable shot of being successful. Just minimally following the playbook. If you're committed to your operations, and we have several multi-unit franchisees that are not the member of every chamber of commerce and not going to three different churches, but they're
Mhm.
committed to their communities one restaurant at a time. And that's the way we look at it. Famous Toastery is not one 25 restaurant company. It's one restaurant 25 times. And what we're built to do now that we weren't previously is to address and support one restaurant 25 times. But that commitment versus compliance, I think, is the great gap. And the distance may be that big on some things or this big on others. But we're looking for commitment.
And what do you think is attracting people to your franchise to want to open a Famous Toastery when there's, 4,000 franchise opportunities
Yeah.
out there?
That's a great question. Anybody that's had the product, with the exception of one that called my baby ugly one time, anybody that's had the product loved it. And I think they can see it in their community in terms of that. But it's also a business decision for a lot of folks now. We had work to do on the prime cost categories. We published it. We say here are our prime costs, and here's why this makes sense as a business. Now, beyond that, can you see yourself successful with the tools and the products that we offer? That is consistency across the brand, and I think it's a pretty easy proposition. Brunch is a one shift operation. No, restaurants are notoriously difficult starting businesses from a startup perspective. You got 2 shifts, everybody talks about the hours. Well, in the brunch space, we appeal to lunch, brunch, and breakfast, but it happens really in 8 hours. That's a 1-shift operation, and there's a lot of ramifications that go in with that. I wish I'd have had this schedule earlier in my career. Frankly, I wouldn't have any gray. I'd be right. So there's a lifestyle change. But if you're entrepreneurial and if you're hustling and you're part of the community and you're genuinely good people to work for, because who you hire is obviously a big part of our playbook about how we select staff, how we select folks for training, and how we select. It's beyond just the real estate, right?
Are you seeking out specifically single unit franchise owners, or you really want multi-unit? Because I know you mentioned you have a few multi-unit operators.
Yeah, we do. It really is what's best for them at that point in time. Our AUVs, we're 1.7. And that's artificially low because our bottom end is low. Our top 25% are 2.3, and we do that in 3,100 square feet. Somebody doing the math, a lot of times it's not just a husband-wife team or a single unit operator. It's a group that to be able to control a market. And in order for that to make sense for them, it's got to be a multi-unit piece. But at the end of the day, I got to be responsible for each one of those locations as we go on. So what makes the most sense? So we're open to either.
Okay. What's the investment range to open a location?
Right now it's for a cold dark shell between 680, which is very low end. That has to be probably a secondary tertiary market to get there. Right around $1 million. Up until this year, we were able to keep build out costs below $1 million. It's going to exceed that this year. Second generation opportunities are almost half that right now, the way things are going, because we don't have fryers anywhere in our building. So a lot of restaurant space is dedicated to that. Not having that, being able to utilize a 12-foot hood with an existing walk-in and freezer arrangement, it's pretty simple for us to do that.
And so about 3,000 square feet is a typical location?
3,100 square feet is a sweet spot with a patio.
Mike, maybe what's one thing that you've learned in the process as being a franchisor that maybe has been surprising that you can maybe share with others that are, emerging franchisors?
Well, most of what I learned is when I was a franchisee for a piece in time. I was a franchisor, I was a franchisee, and I know how I wanted to be treated. So the people we hire here have owned a business or been a franchisee. I think that's relative, more so than having previous restaurant experience. Like I said, our best franchisee, I can name off our top franchisees. None of them had previous restaurant experience, but what they do is that they're committed, and we cannot ever delegate the burden of communication as a franchisor. We have to make sure they understand what's important and why. I think that's what a good franchisor does. I wish I'd have had that when I was a franchisee.
Sure. Well, it's a game changer, first of all, that you were a franchisee, because number one, your franchisees look at you differently because they know that you know what life is really like. Absolutely.
No, it is. And all of our support personnel have owned businesses and been franchisees of other concepts.
Wow.
Our VP of Ops, Rob Steriati, who's terrific. I came up as an ops guy, and ops guys really don't think an ops guy can ever do as well as they did it. But Rob was a franchisee and then an FOM for a company who wanted him to justify his salary by fining franchisees. And that's obviously not any part of our playbook, but he absolutely understood the mentality of people and what they were trying to accomplish with that. It can't be a gotcha game. It's got to feel, the attorneys don't allow me to use the word partner, but it's got to feel like that. It's got to feel like we are in this together.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.